Welcome to a special episode of BasedMent Sports. Obviously, you can tell we're doing something a little bit different today, as I, Corey Plasky, will be your solo host today, and my partner, Matt Pollock, is behind the camera as our producer slash cameraman slash commentary assistant. Today, our episode will solely focus on the state of my New York Jets. As your host, diehard Jets fan, I'll be diving into the topic and controlling the conversation with some input from my friend Pokey. We want to start off today, though, by offering our thoughts and prayers to Damar Hamlin. All of us know what happened the other night, and obviously it was tragic, and we're all thinking of him and are wishing for his recovery. If you haven't yet, please consider donating to his charity through GoFundMe. You could find that link on both our Twitter and Instagram page. Any kind of support, any thoughts, any prayers for him, they mean a lot, obviously, to Damar, and they mean a lot to those who support him. But now, on to the Jets, our main topic today. The New York Jets 2020 season is officially over, even though they have one game left. That sucks to say. It sucks to hear saying. After a very promising start to the season, where New York Jets and their fans like me had their sights on the playoffs, the same old Jets, three words that I hate more than anything in the world. The same old Jets fell flat on their faces. They lost 5 in a row and are eliminated from the playoffs. Poke, I said, we're in hell. I'm in hell. 12 years in a row of not making the postseason it's an embarrassment. There's no other way to describe it. It's torture. The question is, though, how are we here? Why are we here? And where the hell do we go from here to not let this get to 13 years in a row? Because, as I said, it's embarrassing. But fortunately, I'm here to dive into all that. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my opinions. So buckle up, Jets fans. It's the offseason, or almost the offseason, which, as we know, is our time to shine. This is our Super Bowl for the next 8 months. With that being said, let's have a show. So just start off with the season recap. 7-9, missed the playoffs, as I said, 12 straight years. Poe, could you even imagine rooting for a team 12 straight years not making the postseason? I know we're both Knicks fans, so maybe yes, but you're spoiled as far as football goes.
A lot of people have been saying that on Twitter the last couple of weeks because last episode I said it. My New Year's resolution was to stop dogging Mike Tomlin so much because at the end of the day, although Tomlin has his own flaws, where is he every single year at the end of the year? Either in or right in the playoff hunt.
You can't take that for granted. I know that better than anyone. It's 12 straight years. In those 12 years, they've had 2, maybe 3 competitive seasons where, playoffs were a possibility. This year was one of them. 2015, when your team, the Steelers, got in over us, was another. Outside of that, 2011, they were 8-8. So a little bit, but other than that, just it's been dog shit. It's been drafting top 5. It's been no quarterback. It's been bad roster, bad coach. So it's been 12 years of just flat out bad. And this year it felt different. We started off 5-2, best start in a long, long time. 5-2, and so they're 5-2, then 6-3, and 7-4 at 3 different points in the season. And during that time, you could say whatever you want. They beat some backup quarterbacks. They did this. They did that. Well, one thing, they beat Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and we see what the Packers are doing right now. They're 1 game away from the playoffs, playing, as good as most teams in the league. They just smoked the Vikings. And they also beat Josh Allen and the Bills, who had the 1 seed in the AFC. We'll see what happens there. But they had some good wins on the resume. But 2, it's the NFL. Wins are wins. And, you could say whatever you want about, beating the Broncos with a backup quarterback, beating Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins. A win is a win, and wins have the Steelers, in the playoff hunt right now, a game away. It's got the Dolphins in the playoff hunt. It's got the Patriots right there. And lack of wins has the Jets missing out by a game or two. So, I don't give a shit. You win football games. And that's what they were doing earlier in the year. But now, they've lost 5 in a row. 7-9. When we looked at the schedule earlier in the year, it was a tough schedule throughout, especially when you've been a bad team as of late. I mean, everything is a challenge. You don't take anything for granted. Nothing is easy. But you looked at, the end of November and then all of December, some of January. This was like the easy part of the schedule. The Lions, the Jaguars, Seahawks. We didn't really know what to expect out of, Geno in Seattle. When they were 7-4, even when they lost to the Vikings and the Bills, they got to 7-6. You're like, okay, we lost 2 in a row. That sucks. But the schedule is somewhat favorable finishing out this season. Let's get 2 wins, maybe 3, and we're going to be fine. That didn't happen. Didn't even come close to happening. And despite losing 2 more games, despite losing to the Lions in terrible fashion, I'll try not to even talk about that, and getting to 7-7 then, and then losing to the Jaguars 7-8, playoffs were still alive. I mean, not playing good football at the time, but we still had a shot. Everything that we needed to go right for us outside of winning our own football games happened. Packers gave us a Christmas gift. The Patriots gave us a gift by losing in terrible fashion, one of the worst losses ever to the Raiders. Things were working out for us outside of our own control. And what did we do? We got outscored 42-9 against both the Jaguars and the Seahawks combined. That's pathetic. You have the playoffs on the line. You're, for the first time in 12 years, you have an opportunity to get to the postseason. And while you've lost, 3 in a row, while you've lost 4 in a row, everything was still there in front of you. They had to win out and just get 1 loss for the Patriots. That's not too much to ask for. That happens and you're in the playoffs. And they played like shit against the Jaguars. They played like shit against the Seahawks. Weren't competitive in really any of those games. Honestly, they had that strip sack first drive of the game against the Jaguars. And everything after that was just terrible. And the Jaguars just whooped our ass. Same thing as Seahawks. First play of the game, Kenneth Walker, I think it was a 67-yard rush. So honestly, you look at those 2 games, and obviously, you could look at it in more depth. But realistically, they were competitive. They were in those 2 games, which is 120 combined minutes of football. They were in those games for maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes at the most. That is pathetic. That's an embarrassment. It's a bad look for Robert Saleh, a bad look for GM Joe Douglas, Woody Johnson, everybody on this roster. It's a bad look for the Jets overall. And with all that being said, you have to evaluate 2022, and you have to say, what went wrong? Who's to blame? We were 5-2, then 6-3, then 7-4. We were in the playoff picture for the whole year, and now we're sitting here, 5 losses in a row. We're eliminated from the playoffs. We're done 12 straight years. Who's to blame? How did it get to this point? And when that happens, when you haven't gotten to the playoffs in so long, when things aren't going right for you, you have to start with the front office. You start with the front office and the GM, because outside of the owner, that's where all roads lead to. All roads lead to Joe Douglas. He's the one who hires the head coaches. He's the one who signs the free agents. He's the one who makes the draft picks. It's his operation. He's in control. The owner, yes, he's up at top, and Woody Johnson, he's been here for a long time with limited success, very little success. But at the same time, he's trusting Joe Douglas to turn this into a winning football team, and that just hasn't happened. Douglas has been here for 4 seasons now as the Jets GM, and his record is 20-42. 20-42 with 0 playoff appearances. He's responsible for roster construction. It's his job to create a winning roster. Then leave it up to the coach. Leave it up to Robert Saleh. Leave it up to Adam Gase in the past to provide the results on the field. Yeah, I'm talking about Adam Gase. He didn't hire Adam Gase. I'll give him that. But part of the reason Douglas came here is because he had a connection. He had a relationship with Gase, which that's a red flag.
That's not a guy you want to have a relationship with.
That's a red flag right there. But anyways, he's building the roster. He has to make it a winning team and then give it to the coach that he hired, that he trusted to win. The on-field results, they fall back on both of those guys. But really, it's his job to give Saleh, something to work with. And has he done that so far? Not really. It's a big question mark. He took over a bad team and a bad roster when he got here to New York, and there hasn't been much improvement. They're still a bad team, and it's not a bad roster, but it's also not a great roster. That's the biggest way to describe it. He's 20 and 42 in 4 years, and the 4 years before he got there, the Jets were 24 and 40. They were better before he got there than when they are now. And those were the days of Josh McCown starting games for us. Those were the days, Sam Darnold was struggling.
Guy's a dog out in Carolina right now, though.
Yeah, we would. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying we'd kill for him right now, but I'd take him. But 20 and 42 in 4 years, and the 4 years previous, they were 24 and 40. Obviously, numbers-wise, they've gotten worse. On field, they've gotten worse. They haven't gotten better. The same roster problems that they had 4 years ago are still present today. When he took over this team, they didn't have a quarterback. They didn't have an offensive line. They lacked weapons. Guys who could make plays, take over a game out at wide receiver. A running back who could, hit the hole. Obviously, he took Breece Hall, and that was a big draft pick for him, for the Jets. The injury was also big. But still, there were roster holes in a lot of spots on this team. They didn't have depth, and they didn't have talent. You look at this team now in 2022, I talked about the offensive line. It was a complete liability, especially towards the end of the year. Safety as well, running back depth, and just overall talent. The Breece Hall and Elijah Vera Tucker injuries, they really just derailed our season, but especially our offense. And I get it. AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, he would have been an all-pro offensive lineman this year. There are very few offensive linemen in the league that could go and play guard, play right guard, move over, play left guard, move back to the right side, play right tackle. That just doesn't happen. He was a beast wherever you played him, whatever you asked him to do. And then obviously, we saw what this offense was able to do with Breece Hall. He was a stud, and he's another guy that probably would have made a Pro Bowl, and maybe even made an All-Pro team. So obviously, yes, you lose two guys like that, it's gonna hurt. The big parts of your offense, there's some of your better players. Those are massive hits. But when you lose just two guys on your offense and neither one are the quarterback, and it just derails your season, that's a bad look on the depth that you have, and it's a bad look on the talent that you have. Especially the running back position. I could go on all day, talk about how good Breece Hall is. This guy up here, Curtis Martin, one of the best to do it, one of the best to put on the green and white jersey. I definitely don't like when people undervalue the running back position, because there are studs, there are game changers. But if there's one position that you could replace a guy with and not have as hard of a time, it's easier to replace a number one running back than it is to replace a number one receiver, obviously your quarterback, in a bunch of different areas.
Outside of kicker, punter, it's probably the most easily replaceable position. No disrespect to kickers and punters. I'm a big for the brand guy, but...
Exactly.
But yeah,
and especially they had Michael Carter, who was basically their starter last year.
Third-round pick?
He was a fourth-round pick for the Jets last year. Had a good rookie season. They went out, traded for James Robinson. So
where the hell did that guy go?
There was enough there. You would think. The run game was shit after Hall went down, It was especially terrible these last few weeks. They weren't able to do anything. And then the same thing with Vera Tucker. Obviously, it's huge when you lose an offensive lineman. But this guy, I mean, he is also a guard. You know, the tackle position is the premier position on the offensive line, not guard. And to lose, like I said, as talented as he is, as good as he is, to lose a guard on your offensive line and just, you know, for things to go to shit after that, terrible. Terrible. It's a bad look on your roster talent and your roster depth. And these were issues that were present when he took over in 2019, and they're issues here in 2020 or 2022. We don't want to go back to 2020. But
they were in 2023 now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all over the place. So roster holes, I keep talking about roster holes. They're filled in the offseason through the draft and free agency. And free agency especially is where you want to address your immediate needs, where you want to land someone who's going to make an instant impact. A guy like DJ Reed. That's a guy, you look at him, you look at the season that he had with the Jets. That's what you want from your free agent signings. Dude was a stud. Dude should have been a Pro Bowl cornerback. He played at a Pro Bowl level. He played at an All-Pro level. Me and you were not big PFF guys, Pro Football Focus.
I'm a huge PFF guy if they favor my argument.
Exactly. But I figured I'd throw him out there because it gives a decent enough look at how a guy has performed. And you look at DJ Reed, a 74.4 PFF grade, and he was ranked 19 out of 123 NFL quarterbacks. I think he's a little bit higher on that list, but still, that shows you enough. Dude was a stud this year. Those are the guys you want to sign in the offseason that make an impact, that come in, they fill an immediate need, and they take over your team. They change your team. And him, along with a few other guys on the defense, completely changed that defense and was why they're one of the better units in NFL football last year. But outside of Reed, though, there's a whole lot of bad. The areas that Douglas wanted to plug with talent and immediate help have all been failures or damn near close to it. Carl Lawson, he was brought in here 2 years ago to change the pass rush for us. He was the guy. He was the guy that was going to be a double-digit sack guy year in, year out, and completely change his defense, get after that quarterback, put him on his ass. They signed him over Trey Hendrickson, signed him over a couple other guys, and they expected him to be a stud. Unfortunately, year one, he tears his Achilles. That is what it is. In year two, he has 7 sacks, which on paper is good, but he also has a 67.1 PFF grade, and he's ranked 57 out of 119 NFL edge defenders. He's a guy, he's been good, but he has not been what you paid for. He's not been what you asked for. He hasn't lived up to that expectation. Laken Tomlinson, another guy, Joe Douglas, he preaches building up front. He wants to win up front on both sides of the ball. He feels like that's where football games are won. I can't disagree with that. Laken Tomlinson was their big signing this offseason, especially up front offensively. He was supposed to change that offensive line, put him on the left side with Mekhi Becton. Him and AVT were going to control those guard spots, and the Jets were just going to dominate up front and bully people. Well, Tomlinson has a 56.8 PFF grade and is ranked 58th out of 79 NFL guards. Frankly, he's been terrible. Terrible. Jordan Whitehead, safety. Jets haven't had a safety in a long time. The defensive backfield has been terrible up until they got Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. But still, they got killed at safety this year. They couldn't cover a tight end. They had a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misreads. And Whitehead, 64.7 PFF grade and was ranked 47 out of 88 NFL safeties. I don't even think he was that good. Corey Davis, wide receiver, was signed to be our number 1. 66.6 PFF grade, 65 out of 118 NFL wide receivers. The guy is good for a drop a game, a penalty a game, and he doesn't step up in big moments. It's been dog shit. George Fant, another guy. Look at this ranking for me, Poke. 48.4 PFF grade.
Hey, I watch. They've gotten better, but I've watched a an abysmal offensive line in
There's
Pittsburgh early
there's
on
nothing
this year.
worse than it because
There's
there's
nothing more frustrated than watching a game knowing that your running back is going to have no holes to hit and your quarterback has to get rid of the ball in point four. Like, having a and granted, again, I'll say it before anyone gets mad at me. Like, I know there's a lot of Jets fans watching this. I know I'm a spoiled Steelers fan. I get it. I've been spoiled with good football my entire life. But there is nothing more frustrating than watching a terrible offensive line play. It is infuriating.
It just derails an offense, and you know every play is you're doomed. George Fant, I'll give him, he had a good 2021. But this year, 48.4 PFF grade, ranked 76 out of 80 NFL offensive tackles. So you look at it, these are his big free agent signings. And outside of DJ Reed, nobody has hit. Nobody has lived up to expectations. Nobody has lived up to the money that they're getting paid. And that's a big reason why this Jets team isn't playing in the postseason. Because still, even with all this, the roster was still good enough to get to that point, despite some areas that were bad, despite bad quarterback play. But man, if he hit on a few offensive linemen, on a spot here or there, if they could have had a safety or two to hold down that secondary and play to the level that Reed and Gardner were playing at, we're having a different conversation here. It's not all negative. It's not, being down. It's a lot of positives. The Jets are playing postseason football. But no, he's missed time after time. I mean, his free agency classes have been terrible. And in hindsight, and some of his move, I was pissed when he let Robbie Anderson go.
Sun God
didn't sign him for. I mean, he got a 2-year, I believe it was a $20 or $22 million contract from the Panthers. They let him go at a time where Sam Darnold and the Jets had no weapons, and he was their number one. There hasn't been much that you've liked. And you could even go into last year, they brought in C.J. Uzomah and Tyler Conklin to change the tight end room, help the passing game. Conklin had a decent year, but still another guy with a ton of drops. Didn't do a whole lot. And same thing with Uzomah. Uzomah was used as a blocker for more than half of the year. Little effect in the passing game. The guy just hasn't hit in free agency, and that's just an absolute killer. And if you're not going to hit in free agency, you absolutely have to hit in the draft. The draft is the other time of the year where roster construction and improvement are conducted. It's where rebuilding teams like the Jets find young talent to change the course of the franchise. It might not be the thing that makes you an immediate winner, an immediate contender in year one, although you look at their rookie class this year, it did do that. But you're looking at guys that are going to be here 5, 10, 12 plus years, and they're going to change your franchise. They're going to change the type of team you are. And Joe Douglas has poured a lot of time and energy and focus into the draft. His whole big thing is he wants to rebuild through the draft, get guys, like I said, that are going to change this team and be here for a long time, and fill areas of need in free agency. That's his motto. That's not coming from me. That's not coming from any other Jet sources. It's coming from the mouth of Joe Douglas. He wants to make his bones as an NFL GM in the NFL draft. And so far, I said there's mixed results. Without that 2022 class this year, it's dog shit. Dog shit. I'll start with the positive, just to get off the negative side for a little bit. This year's class was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. It's a class that will be talked about for years and years. It will be looked at as one of the best draft classes of recent times. Sauce Gardner, he should win Defensive Player of the Year. He should.
Let's relax.
He's going to be an All-Pro. First team All-Pro. He's been locked down.
It's hard for a DB to win Defensive Player of the Year. You want to know this.
It is. Darrelle Revis.
They're not giving it to
Darrelle Revis should have had one. I'm confident he will. Aiden Hutchinson has had a very good year.
He'll run Defensive Rookie of the Year. Not.
That's what.
Okay.
Oh yeah. That's what I meant.
All right.
He will not win Defensive Player of the Year. I meant to say Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's got that locked up.
I mean, he's good enough to be in the conversation, I guess. Yeah. But that's why I was.
But no, definitely Rookie of the Year. He's got that.
Aiden Hutchinson dropping back in coverage last week, though. I mean, he's got that.
How about that play?
Dude, he's a stud.
But still, Gardner's a stud. Garrett Wilson's a stud. probably wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't know. We'll see how Kenneth Gainwell performs this week.
Kenneth Walker.
Kenneth Walker, excuse me. We'll see if he has a monster game to take over there. 2 studs there. Jermaine Johnson, a lot of talent.
Time out. Back to the Offensive Rookie of the Year real quick. Kenny Pickett gets to the playoffs. I think we got to start throwing KP8's name out there.
I get what you mean. I definitely do. He'll get votes.
Quarterback
along
league.
with Brock
Quarterback
Purdy.
league.
Along with
Brock Purdy. You're right, dude. You're right.
Who's been a stud. But, Jermaine Johnson, a lot of talent. He's done some good things in his rookie year. We knew he wasn't going to have the type of impact that some other rookies will have. But he's a guy that you love to have there. He's going to be here for a long time doing some good things. Breece Hall, stud. Max Mitchell filled in and was starting at a tackle position and doing really well until he got injured. And Michael Clemens, another guy, 4th-round pick that has had a solid rookie season, 2.5 sacks as just, a spot pass rusher, situational pass rusher. The class overall has been great. I mean, we talked last week about some of our favorite moments of 2022 and sports moments, and I said draft night was up there. That was a great day, great night to be a Jets fan. Absolutely. So I'll give Joe Douglas that. But when you look at 2021 and 2020, massive duds. Massive. Terrible. We read off some of the names here. We'll start with his first draft in 2020. Mekhi Becton. He's played 15 games in 3 years. They drafted him over Tristan Wirfs, who's been a Pro Bowl and All-Pro guy. Denzel Mims hasn't caught a touchdown pass in his NFL career. That 2020 wide receiver class was loaded. Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Michael Pittman. And Joe Douglas traded back in the second round and landed Denzel Mims, who hasn't done anything. And then after that, it's nothing but guys that are either cut or bench players, depth guys. I mean, you can't have that as a rebuilding team. 2021, Zach Wilson. We know what we need to know about him. We'll talk about him later. Elijah Vera Tucker, talked about him, stud, great pick. Outside of that, Elijah Moore had a very disappointing sophomore year. So did Michael Carter. Michael Carter, the second, the defensive back, had a great start to 2022, then just completely fell off. And then the same thing with this class, who they're all in year 2, and it's nothing but guys that are either cut or guys that are bench players and special teams players. You just can't have that. You can't have that. And now, I mentioned Zach Wilson. We know what we need to know about him. He's been the anchor to the ships of both Douglas and Robert Saleh. On the field, they've had issues, in all different areas, but on the field, it's been the biggest issue for the Jets. And their lack of an answer at quarterback and the poor play, especially from Wilson, is why they're a 7-win team. There's no denying that. And Douglas and Saleh, they decided that he was the guy in 2021. They took him over Fields. They took him over Lance, over Mac Jones. When you put your name next to a guy like that, when you put your name next to a quarterback, that quarterback better step up. He better show out, or else your ass is gonna be on the streets with him if he can't perform. And it's getting close to that point. Zach Wilson in 2022, 9 starts, less than 1,700 yards in 9 starts, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and somehow, someway, a 5-4 record.
That defense carried him at the beginning of the year.
Quarterback rating, he ranks 33rd out of 33 qualifying quarterbacks, meaning that he's dead last in the NFL in QBR. And his career record is 8-14, 15 total touchdowns, or 15 passing touchdowns, I should say, 18 interceptions, and he averages just 182 yards per game. We saw 45-year-old Brady, not to put those two in the same sentence, the same breath, but we just saw Brady throw he got over 400 last week, right? If not, damn close to it.
354, something like that.
182 yards per game, especially for a team that loses. Especially his rookie year, they got their asses kicked a lot. You would think they'd be throwing the ball a little bit more in garbage time. 182 yards per game. That's pathetic. And as I mentioned, he was drafted over Fields, who has shown flashes of being a stud. Mac Jones, who I don't love, I don't think you love, but, I mean, we can't deny the fact that he made the playoffs his rookie year, and he's got them in the playoff hunt, one game away from it now.
I'll say this. He's a game manager.
Yeah.
I think...
A game manager
he's
would
very
be
Jimmy
perfect for the
G-esque,
Jets.
where,
Yeah.
you give him the right system, he fucking do what he needs to do. You saw
Absolutely.
that last year. I think the Patriots roster last year was better than the one they have this year. I mean, if he was on the Jets, who knows? I'm not saying, they're in a better spot with Mac than they are right now with Zach Wilson.
I mean, there's no denying, there's no arguing. He's better than Wilson. He's been better than Wilson by a lot.
Yeah. He had I said this coming out of, the college year, right before that drop. There's record of me saying Mac Jones had the best college tape out of any of these quarterbacks, and that includes T-Law.
Yeah.
Mac Jones had the best college tape out of all of these
Fields,
guys.
I would throw Fields with him, but especially because Fields played 2 years compared to the Mac 1 year and a couple of games. But national championship, his wide receiver, his number one wide receiver won the Heisman. He was the Heisman runner-up. He had great tape. Zach Wilson had solid tape, but I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily the guy that says, oh, if you don't play big-time college football, then you can't make it in the NFL, especially at quarterback. Where did Josh Allen go? He went to Wyoming after going to a junior college. Where did Steve Young go? He went to BYU like Zach Wilson. There's been plenty of guys that do it.
Carson Wentz before he tore his ACL in North Dakota State.
But when you got Justin Fields, who played big-time college football at Georgia and then Ohio State, where his career took off, and that was really where his career was. When he's playing big-time college football and he's lighting Power 5 teams up, Big Ten defenses up, Clemson up, you can't overlook that. You can't push that to the side and say, we don't love that. His tape was phenomenal. That game, that semifinal game against Clemson, he lit it up. I said that night, when I seen him throw that ball, I knew that I needed him on the Jets. Absolutely. At that point in time, we missed out on the number 1 pick. We weren't getting Trevor Lawrence. It had to be Justin Fields. The tape was there. He was a gamer. He played big-time college football and was successful. I watched Zach Wilson a handful of times in college, but the one game that I really watched start to finish, really evaluated him, I guess you could say, was against Coastal Carolina, and he got his ass kicked that game. Didn't look good at all. His team lost, and that was a good Coastal team. I mean, I just don't understand how... Face it, everybody was blinded by that pro day film. Thrown against
that one throw.
Exactly.
That literally one throw.
That one throw. I mean, sure, it looks nice, it looks sexy, but it's thrown against air. Which is much of what he threw against playing at BYU. And you look at his career at BYU, he played for 3 years, started basically the whole year for 2 years, but it was really only one good year of college football, which was the 2020 COVID year. He threw for 3,700 yards, 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The year before that, 11 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. It wasn't like this dude lit it up for a long time. He had one good year in a down year in college football because of COVID.
It's not a one good year. One good year in college football is not created equal. One good year in the SEC is much better than one good year at BYU.
Well, look at that compared now to Justin Fields' stats. 2 years at Ohio State. In 2019, just about 3,300 yards, 41 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And then 2020 COVID year, 2,100 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions.
The stigma of Ohio State quarterbacks ruined his draft stock, maybe.
And the guy got to a national championship game. I mean, that will be looked at, especially if things don't work out for Douglas in New York. That will be his demise. That will be what people look at and say, man, how did you miss on that? Especially, too, if Fields takes off like he has looked.
Yeah, it'll only get louder if Trey Lance comes back and is
that's another one who they passed on.
I don't have faith in that happening, but you never say never, right?
Exactly. Now, we focused on Douglas a lot. The last area that needs to be addressed as far as 2022 and where things went wrong is the coaching staff, which is Robert Saleh. Saleh and his crew, they just haven't been good. At best, they've been a notch above bad, which is basically meh. That's how I would describe it. 2021, it is what it is. They weren't good enough to win. We knew they weren't going to win. We knew they weren't going to make the playoffs. That's fine. But 2022 is different. I mentioned it still wasn't a great roster, but it was certainly good enough to make the playoffs, and they were in a position to do so. But then they just collapsed, and part of their collapse was just not even looking like a competitive football team that wanted to play football and wanted to win games. And in the end, that leaves you evaluating Saleh's tenure as the Jets head coach, and overall, there's just not much to love. Guy's been here for 2 years and has a career record of 11-22. Compare that to some past Jets coaches. Adam Gase was 9-23. Todd Bowles was 24-40. In his first 2 years, he was 15-17. That's better than Saleh. Rex Ryan, 46-50, was 20-12 his first 2 years, made the playoffs twice. And Eric Mangini, 23-25, made the playoffs once. His first 2 years, he was 14-18, which is also better than Saleh. So you see how Saleh stacks up with the last 4 coaches for the Jets. And the only guy that he's better than is Adam Gase, which one isn't saying much, and he's only better than him by a game and a half. 2 games. I mean, that's embarrassing. Gase had a bad roster when he took over, and he went 7-9 his first year. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you told me, back in August, back in July, the Jets would be a 7-8 win football team. They play competitive games in December. I'd be like, that's a good step in the right direction. That would meet, but probably even exceed a little bit of what we thought for this team. But preseason expectations, they go out the window in September. They go out the window when you're 5-2 and you're playing for first place in the AFC East, 6-7 weeks into the season. Or 7-8 weeks into the season. After their bye week, they had a shot for the division, and this was back in November. So don't give me any of that crap that, Saleh, in which Saleh himself said the other day, we had a bad roster when we took over, blah, blah, blah. And, the point that, where we are now, it's a great accomplishment, basically. I don't have his direct quote, but even he is, putting this on a pedestal. Don't give me that, man. You got 7 wins this year, which is the same thing that Adam Gase did in his first year. You're doing that in year 2. You've lost 5 games in a row. You haven't had this team, ready to play football at the biggest moments of the year. That's incredibly disappointing, and it makes me think that, maybe this isn't the guy. Maybe, we truly have to, evaluate him. Because he was flat out embarrassed. Him and his team were flat out embarrassed by the Jaguars and the Seahawks. Which, sure, the Jaguars are playing good football now. They got a great shot at making the playoffs. And same thing, the Seahawks, they're in the playoff hunt. They're 2 solid teams. But there's no excuse. The Jaguars game was a home game, and the Seahawks game, they had like a mini bye. They had 10 weeks to prepare for this. And they prepared, they weren't. They didn't show up. They weren't ready to play. And that all falls back on the head coach. And, as far as coaching goes, you could go down the line, start with the OC, Mike LaFleur. Another guy that's just been flat out terrible. I mean, their offense hasn't looked good really at any point in his 2 years in New York.
You could have Matt Canada if you want.
Honestly, though, I mean, he might be better.
All right, let's not go too far here.
Listen to these numbers, though. In 2022, 326 yards per game, which ranks 22nd in the league. In 18.1 points per game, which is 27th. In 2021, 306 yards per game, which ranked 26th in the league. 18.2 points per game, which is 28th. They averaged 0.1 more points last year with a worse team, worse offense than they did this year. In 9 points in their last 2 games, no touchdowns. You can say what you want about Matt Canada. When the Steelers needed to play solid football and win games, they did enough.
Ask me who called the plays the last 2 drives, both games.
Still, though.
Ask me who called the plays.
It still falls back on
KPA
his shoulders.
Did it.
It still falls back on his shoulders. It's his offense. It's his playbook.
His playbook stinks.
9 points in their last 2 games against a Jaguars defense that was missing a lot of key players and a Seahawks defense that is one of the worst units in the league, giving up about 25, 26 points a game. and you score no touchdowns against them.
Not for nothing, you mentioned it earlier. The Seattle game, it was a no contest from the fucking get. I mean, the Jets showed up. Like, the Jets showed up with, like, their fucking you-know-what in their hands. Like, they were not ready to play football.
I mean, their offense in the second half, I mean, that was like watching a Pop Warner offense. They couldn't do a thing. Yeah. And then we talked about them showing up for the Jaguars game. The defense showed up for the first few minutes, forcing that strip sack, that fumble. And then what did the offense do? 3 and out. We lost yards, had to kick a field goal, and that was it for the rest of the day. They didn't show up at any point in time. And that falls on the shoulders of the OC, he's been terrible his whole time here. And sure, he hasn't been dealt the best of hands, hasn't had a quarterback, hasn't had some, weapons, but still, I mean, it's the NFL, it's 2022. There's just no ingenuity with this offense. They look terrible, and the numbers prove that. Moving on to Jeff Ulbrich, defensive coordinator. Overall, defense had a great year. You can't really complain too much about them. The only thing that I will mention about this defense, 16 total takeaways this year, which ranked 27th in the NFL. They had a -7 turnover differential, which you could blame the offense for a lot of that, but still 16 total takeaways is not good enough. That's not going to get the job done, especially when you have an offense that isn't good. You got to win field position battles. You need your defense to make big plays to change games. They didn't do that. And their -7 turnover differential this year ranked 30th in the league. It's bottom 3 in the league. That just can't happen, especially when they have enough talent on that defense. 2021, you look at his unit, only 14 takeaways, which was 31st in the league, and a -13 turnover differential, which ranked 30th. You see in 2 years now, they can't make game-changing plays. They can't help their offense out. And that's a killer. And you evaluate, the season as a whole now, the defense certainly hasn't looked bad the last 5 weeks, but they haven't looked great. They haven't looked like they did earlier in the year. And much of that, we saw them at that Bears game. C.J. Mosley had a late interception in the fourth quarter. Outside of that, 1 turnover, which was that strip sack Quentin Williams had on Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. Just 1 turnover since that Bears game, which was way back in November. And this was during a stretch that was the most important stretch of the season. They didn't show up in that way. They also didn't pressure the quarterback like they were. Quentin Williams missed a couple games, and they looked like a completely different unit. So, Jeff Ulbrich, I mean, I definitely don't want to blame the defense at all. You definitely can't. You'd be an idiot. And he's done a solid job, but was it good enough? Could it have been better? I think so. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And, when you miss the playoffs for 12 years in a row, you need to be better. You need somebody that's going to maximize the talent that you have, because if you don't have that kind of coaching staff, then you're fucked. You're screwed, and you have no hope. And that's that. More than enough regarding the 2022 season. It's been misery. It's been a tough last couple weeks, last month. Now the question is, looking ahead, because that's what we have to do. It's our off season. It's, like I said earlier, it's our time to shine. Where do we go from here? What do we need to do to be competitive in 2023 and be playing playoff football? Because let's be honest, like I said, that it's still not a great roster. They still have holes, but it's still a team that's good enough to get to the postseason. And let's face it, they have a window right now to get to the playoffs and to win. They've got a lot of young talent on rookie contracts, meaning that they could go out and they could pay some other people. They could make moves, break open the checkbook, and improve this roster. Now is the time to do it. Now is the window, because 2-3 years, Quentin Williams is going to have another contract. In 2 to 3 years, you're going to have to pay Sauce Gardner. You're going to have to pay Garrett Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker. You're going to have to pay some of the young talent, the young studs that you do have. But while they're all on a rookie contract, not making that much money, probably not making what they're worth quite yet, You need to go out there and you need to get guys, you need to get dogs that are going to change this roster and change this team. Because you absolutely have to make the playoffs next year, and anything less than that is unacceptable. So where do you go from here? I think first you have to evaluate Joe Douglas, Ian Robert Saleh, and the coaching staff talked about it. First off, Mike LaFleur, he needs to be gone. I already talked about how bad the offense was. I don't see it getting much better. I don't have much hope there. You see his inability to get Elijah Moore the football. That has killed his team. You see his inability to get the run game going without a guy like Breece Hall. You've seen how injuries just completely affect his unit. It just tells me that he's not quite built for this. He's not built to run an NFL offense. He can't handle the challenges that come with it. They need to do something else there. They need another answer. Get Mike LaFleur out of here. That's first off. Then I look at Robert Saleh. I think he's here in 2023. I'd be really, really shocked if he wasn't. But it's hard not to ignore, one, what he's done in New York or what he hasn't done. 11-22 speaks for itself. 5-game losing streaks speaks for itself. Just the way that they've shown up the last few weeks says enough. And it's hard to argue some of the names that are out there on the market looking for head coaching jobs. 1, Sean Payton, and 2, Jim Harbaugh. For Jets fans out there, we know that Woody Johnson, our owner, he loves him some Harbaugh. He's wanted Jim Harbaugh to be this head coach for some time now. Timing didn't match up some years. They weren't able to get him. But we know he's a big Harbaugh guy. And there's been rumors that Harbaugh wants to come back to the NFL. And listen, like Pokey's saying right now, it's going to cost money. Woody Johnson's desperate. Guy hasn't made the playoffs in 12 years. On top of it, he has to see his neighbor, the Giants, in year one of the Brian Daboll era, reach the postseason. They've had a phenomenal year. And Daboll was a guy the Jets interviewed, a guy I wanted them to hire. And that's another reflection on the job that Joe Douglas has done, saying no to that guy. But Woody has to look at all that, and let's face it, you would have to think he's a desperate guy that could make a desperate move and to really change things. And like I said, I think Saleh is here. I would be shocked if he weren't. But it wouldn't really surprise me to see Woody go out there and, show his interest in a guy like Harbaugh. I saw Brandon Tierney, a guy that he's got the Tiki and Tierney show on, I believe it's SNY. He's somebody that threw out there, man, go after Sean Payton. Do whatever it takes. Especially because this offense has been dog shit for a
you have to give him draft picks for that, though.
Long time. Which, would we be okay with that? If it's gonna bring us results, I think you got to do what you got to do. But it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me to see some reports say, the Jets are gonna look into these guys. And now, if Saleh's back here next year and Douglas are back here next year, which I think happens, playoff mandate. It has to happen. Douglas will be in year 5. Saleh will be in year 3. If neither one of them could get to the postseason, what are we doing here? We're just wasting time. That's what we're doing. And if they can't get it done next year, like I said, they have a window. They have the talent, and they have a massive opportunity this offseason to build on that. If they can't do it, their ass is gone. It's got to be playoffs or bust. That has to be the motto for everybody in that front office, everybody in that locker room. They need to get to that point, because if not, it's just a massive, massive failure. And they're not going to get to that point without a quarterback. That's the biggest thing this offseason. You got to move on from Zach Wilson. That's easier said than done. I don't think Pokey would disagree on that. He's one of the biggest busts in recent times, maybe ever.
He's terrible.
He's flat out terrible. Then comes Mike White. The guy had a perfect opportunity to win the job. He didn't do it. I feel bad for him because the injury definitely affected him last week against the Seahawks. It took 2 games away from him. It sucks. The guy probably lost out on millions of dollars and a golden opportunity to be an NFL starting quarterback. But he's not the guy. If we're serious about winning, if we're serious about making the playoffs and, being a winning team, being a competitive team, you have to go the veteran quarterback route. And the 2 names that are going to be brought up time after time are Derek Carr and Jimmy G. Now, I might have my preferences. I like Carr as the player maybe a little bit better, but I also think Jimmy G, with his familiarity with this offense, this scheme, plus his experience winning, I don't think you could go wrong with either option. I think both options make you a winning team from day one and are going to change you next year. They're going to bring you from a 7-win team to a 10-win team to an 11-win team, a team that can make a run in the postseason. So that's where the attention has to be. That's what it's to me, it's those 2 guys are bust. You could talk about Aaron Rodgers. You could talk about Lamar Jackson. If they're available, go all in, especially Lamar. Guy in his 20s. Pokey's not a big fan of him. He's a easily top 12 quarterback in the league. Easily. I mean,
I'm nervous what you're going to say there.
Put him on the Jets this year, and
if he's healthy, the last couple of years he hasn't been healthy.
I'll give you that, but still.
He's an upgrade.
He's not an upgrade. Is there? I don't think.
Is there a bigger word? Yeah.
I don't think upgrade properly explains it.
It's night and day.
It is. I think those 2 are long shots. Plus, they'll take a lot to get them in a trade. If they're available, though, you gotta consider it. To me, I like Lamar better because I talked about his age and all that. I don't know about selling the farm for Rodgers, who's 39. There's some the guy's as unpredictable as it gets. I don't know how long he's going to be here. But either or, if you do get Rodgers for 2 years, you're a Super Bowl contending team for 2 years. And we're desperate for that moment.
Jets haven't been that since, what year was Super Bowl 3?
1967 and 68.
There you go.
Outside of that, you got your Genos, you got your Jared Goffs, Minshew, Jameis, Tannehill. There will be a bunch of options, but the Jets can't afford to miss. They can't afford to get a secondary option. They can't afford to mess around. Can't afford to fuck around, because you fuck around, you're going to find out. And what you're going to find out is it's going to be no different from the last 13 years, or the last 12 years. It will be no different from our time post Joe Namath. You got to go big. You got to spend at the quarterback position, all around this roster where they have holes. You got to be flexible with draft picks. I know Joe Douglas loves his draft, but like I said, it will take draft picks to get a Lamar, to get an Aaron Rodgers, to get talent. They have to go all in. All chips need to be pushed in, because it's go time. Nut up or shut up. Especially for Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, this is it for you. You know that if it doesn't work out in 2023, we're done. So for me, I'm thinking like part of that is kind of exciting, you would think, because it's like, all right, Joe Douglas is going to do whatever he has to do to stay here in New York and keep his job. Because I don't know of too many GMs that get fired their first go-around and getting another opportunity. That doesn't happen quite as much. It doesn't happen a whole lot with coaches, but a hell of a lot more. So for both of them, your job's on the line. You got to think they're going all in. They're putting it all on red and saying, let's go. You would have to think that happens. The only problem is they've both been pretty disappointing to this point. They've both been unpredictable. So who the hell knows what will happen? And that perfectly describes what it's like to be a Jets fan. It's just, you never know what's going to happen. You never know. Although you do know it's going to be a lot of misery. But
do you want me to lighten your mood?
Sure.
Who's your baseball team? You want breaking news?
I guess the Red Sox. What do we got?
Devers, 11 years, 331.
Am I back?
I told you you'd be at Fenway.
No. I said it. Even Devers signing wouldn't. It will make me happy, but I'm still pissed about Bogarts. That's next week's pod, I guess. Maybe not even next week. Maybe we'll bring that to you tomorrow. But back to the Jets. Like I said, it's the most important offseason ever. As disappointing as the end of 2022 was, the season overall showed us that we took steps in the right direction. We have young talent in the building blocks in place in order to be a competitive team. Now it's time to pounce on that opportunity and fill the necessary holes that we have. The necessary holes that need to be filled. And most importantly, find the quarterback. It's the most important position in football, most important position in sports. If they fail, they're screwed. And we all might as well find another team to root for, because if they can't make this work, I don't have much hope for anything working. Rest assured, though, these next few months, they are monumental for the Jets, for the Jets fans out there, and will determine what path they're going down. They're at a fork in the road. Are we going to continue down the same path we've been for the last 12 years, or are we going to find a new path to success? You got to think, you got to hope it's this one. If not, we're fucked. We're screwed. And you know what? We're Basement Sports. We appreciate you all out there, all of our fans. Take a look at my blog that I just posted about the Jets 2022 season and their future. Follow us on all socials. Have a great night, everybody.